Backseas Musical Podcast.
My guest today is one of my favorite musicians of all time. Colin Moudling was not only the wildly underrated bass player for the band XTC from 1972 to 1991, Colin is also the guy who wrote the band's first three charting singles, including Life Begins at the Hop, their commercial breakthrough Making Plans for Nigel, both from 1979, and Generals and Majors, which came out the following year. And while Andy Partridge may have been the band's principal songwriter, who's often considered to be a bona fide genius, there's no question that Colin Moudling's contributions to XTC were every bit as brilliant, which frankly would be a lot to ask for anybody. But Colin Moudling was always up for the task. Last summer, when I spoke to Andy Partridge, we talked about the band's amazing journey from being a small little band from the English town of Swindon to becoming the opening act for the Police and the Talking Heads, to abruptly ending live performances due to Andy's debilitating panic attacks, only made worse from the abrupt withdrawal of a 12-year-long dependence on Valium. And while XTC would never perform live again, some of their greatest music was yet to come. This was a band that released some of the best albums of the decade, including Drums and Wires, Black Sea, English Settlement, and Skylarking. All brilliant, all critically praised, but met with various levels of success. Today, 21 years after XTC recorded together for the very last time, Colin Moudling has made a comeback, then a retirement, and then another comeback. First appearing with original XTC drummer Terry Chambers as TC and I back in 2017. And this year, Colin has just released his first solo single ever with the song The Hardest Battle. And as expected, it's like the man never skipped a beat. So for me personally, this was a real big one. This was my conversation with Colin Moudling of XTC on Backseas Musical Podcast. Nice to see you.
And you.
Thank you so much for doing this. I've been a huge fan of you and XTC for so long, and that to have any kind of new music from you feels like a real gift. So thank you for that. I think that the new song "Hardest Battle" is fantastic. It's good to hear your voice, even if it's multi-tracked 1,000 times over.
Yeah, well, we've had a lockdown, so you're on your own.
That is true. How has the lockdown been for you?
Well, just working, really. That's all you can do.
Right.
Boris Johnson said, "You must stay home," so I stayed home, and that's what does a musician do but make music when he's on his own.
Yeah, I know that over the years there have been stories about you not having interest in continuing to do music, and then you come back, the TC and I thing happens, and then that you retire from that, and all of a sudden you come back with a brand new single. What changed for you? Was it in fact the lockdown that got you to have that itch to start doing it again, or was it something different?
Well, I liked singles culture. I always have done, really. Probably more so than album culture, if there
Right.
is such a thing. So I thought, I stumbled across this song, and I thought, you know what, that might be a single. So I'll put it out as a single, and the old rules don't apply anymore when you're on your own. You don't have record company people saying you've got to do this and that. Their commercial interests are long gone. So you've just got yourself. So I thought it would be just a lovely thing to do.
I don't know. Do you have a long history of record companies trying to force their influence on you?
Well, in the 80s, I think they, the need for a hit was paramount,
Right.
to boost sales. So, yeah, they've had their funny 5 minutes,
So a few years ago, you and Terry Chambers got together with TC and I, and I thought the music was terrific. And again, it's like one of those things where, as an XTC fan, when I hear Colin Moudling's voice again, it's kind of like getting reacquainted with an old friend, even though we've never met. That's the impression that I'm always left with whenever I hear something new from either you or Andy when that happens, because that doesn't happen an awful lot. But whenever I do, it's like, there it is. It's something so comfortable that it's for someone who's not a fan, it may be hard to describe, but but for someone who does love XTC and your music, it feels so familiar and comfortable and wonderful to have you guys recording again.
Yeah, well, it was great to do that with Terry. He was back in the country after being in Australia for about 30 odd years. And when I learned he was back in the country, I'd already started this little EP, and basically I thought, well, I wonder if he would be interested, you know. And lo and behold, we went out for a few drinks, as you do, and I popped the question, and he said, well, you know, I'm out of form, but I'll give it a go, you know. So that's what we did. We spent 7 or 8 months making this EP, and you know.
It's funny how when he left XTC in 1982, you guys had decided that you were coming off the road and no longer going to be doing live performances again. And then here the two of you are, for the first time in many years, performing on stage. And I realized it was mostly around Swindon and other parts of England, but that had to be a huge thrill to be playing on stage with the guy that you literally grew up playing with.
Yeah, well, the Swindon gigs, we thought we'd make a showpiece, you know. It's like going to a West End show or Broadway or something, keep it in one place. So you actually you set the gear up and you don't move it, and that's fantastic. And we just had a great deal of fun. And Terry's thing is touring, really. That's what he likes to do. I'm not so keen. So I thought, well, he's helped me out on the EP. We've done that together. And I knew he was itching to do some shows. So I said, all right, well, why don't we stage it in one place? We'll find a venue, you know. So we did that for half a dozen shows, and they were fantastic. It was lovely to hear all those songs kind of coming out in a concert hall, you know. That was a luxury for me.
And it's also a bunch of songs, I mean, not only that you haven't performed in a long time, but also songs that have never been performed publicly too. I mean, what was the reaction of crowd? I mean, these are people who have been waiting since 1982 to see you guys play, this music. What was the reaction to the crowds for those half dozen shows?
Well, I heard there were grown men weeping in the aisles, you know.
all record executives, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but I didn't mop their tears up, but you know, they clearly felt something deep. Yeah, and that was wonderful. Yeah.
I also love the fact that on this new single you brought back the song "Say It," which, and correct me if I got this wrong, it was only released on the Apple Venus box set, and the story that I had read was that it was either the last song you had written for XTC or the last song that you had recorded as a band, or while you were still in the band. Is that how that worked out?
Yeah, it was kind of the last days of XTC, very much like the last days of Rome, you know. And yeah, it was pretty much the last song that I wrote for XTC, and for the album that never was, really. But I thought it got sort of dispensed with, really, because when it became clear that we weren't going to do an album, and it was the crumbling of the band, it got put out on a promo disc, and I thought, my God, that's just throwing it away, you know.
Right.
And I had a lot of faith in the song, and I remembered the early version that I did with a local guy called John Bucket on piano, and I thought, you know what, that's got seems to have a lot more feeling than the one we had with XTC. So I thought it deserved a better fate than it got. So I thought, well, I'm going to do it again. You know?
It's interesting how "Say It" and The Hardest Battle 21 years later kind of have like a similar theme to it. Both very encouraging, songs, either, to speak your mind or to thine own self be true. And was that intentional to pair those songs up, or did you just think, oh, this song has kind of a similar bent to it?
No. The Hardest Battle I wanted out as a single, and the guys at Burning Shed I said to them, well, do you do singles? You know, I quite like singles. And he said, well, we do singles, but have you got anything else? You know, and then I remembered that version of Say It, and I thought, you know what, that would go perfect on this record. And of course, they both end with the word now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Somebody pointed that out, I think, on YouTube, and I thought, my God, he's right. They both end on the word now. I guess I'm a very impatient man.
Right. Well, I mean, it certainly punctuates the point of both songs and what you're trying to say. It's like it's not just say how what you feel, whether it's telling somebody that you love them or whatever it may be. But it's like that's the punctuation that
Well, it is because time is precious, especially when you get to our age, or my age, I should say. I beg your pardon, but yeah, time is fleeting, and you really got to do it now, otherwise it may never get done. You know.
there's also a part of me that hears the song "Say It," and if you take it, literally. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can interpret it. You can interpret it as say, tell someone that you love them, that you in fact love them. But there's a part of me that says, at the time that you're writing this song, I'm wondering if the words were maybe directed towards Andy at the time to say, either we continue this as a band or we just stop it. Just make a choice and say it. Was that did that have any part of this of creating that song?
No, I don't. I don't think it was about Andy or that. Well, subconsciously, it may have been. I don't know, but I I think with Say It, I just wanted to make it an everyday statement about, if you're on a train or something, or even, you must come out with it. If you're thinking it, you must say it there and then.
Right.
And very often when you write a song, you don't really know what they're about until you're into them. You come up with a first phrase or a first line, and you think, well, I've got to justify it. So I thought, well, in a few minutes, I justify it, or a
Right.
few lines, I justify it, and then you're on your way. Then it's like it becomes a crossword puzzle that has to be worked out. But to begin with, you don't always know what it's about.
I watched the XTC documentary a while back. It's very hard to find these days, but it's a wonderful documentary. As far as I thought it was terrific. But as a fan, there's a lot of things that you take away from that story. And one of the things that seems to be true is that there was always something getting in the way of XTC reaching like that next level of success. Sometimes it was like self-induced, other times it was induced by outside forces, producers, weird timing, bad management, all those things. In hindsight, after looking at your career, and I don't know how reflective you are about the past or nostalgic you get, but do you have a different sense of what happened to the band back then today as opposed to when it was actually happening?
No, I don't think my views have changed on it all that much, really. We were the individuals that we were, and that dynamic between those individuals produces something. We could be, we could play sweet pop, we could be angular, we could be many things, jazz, but we were what we were. The the individuals made up this mass,
Right.
that was XTC, and we were an odd bunch, I think.
The story of the band is very unique in the sense that here you have a couple of, like you said, different personalities. You and Andy and Dave Gregory and Terry and even Barry Andrews, if you want to go that far back. Initially it's very clear that Andy is kind of like the alpha male of the band, but you come into your own as a songwriter to almost the same level, to maybe even more so because of the success of those early singles that Nigel and Generals and Majors. I
Yeah.
mean, to have emerged and to have reached that level, I think would be a lot to ask of most musicians. Can you write songs that compete as well as what a guy like Andy Partridge has written? I mean, did you feel any pressure to I don't know if to compete with Andy or just to rise to the level of what he was capable of?
Well, I think when Barry left, it was acted like a bit of a catalyst, really. Those early albums were quite idiosyncratic, they're quite angular,
Mhm.
lots of discords and stuff. And after a while, I thought, is this really you? You're a melodic guy, that's what you've got to do. And it's just a case of finding your own. And I was a melodic guy. I thought, right, I'm going to start writing in the way perhaps I should have started, because I think in the beginning I just wanted to fit in. You've got to remember that I only started writing really on the nose of the first album, really, and I didn't. Before that, Andy was the only writer in the band. I always say that one of the roadies or something said to me, Colin, you ought to start writing because otherwise you'll miss out. I thought, well, I'll give it a go. So I compare myself to, well, in a way, to George Harrison, because he started writing when Lennon and McCartney were really up and running and in their prime, and that was difficult for him. So his first efforts were in the public eye as well as mine. That's the compatibility or comparing of like for like, I think. Because we had to get better in the public eye, and that's not always easy. Not that easy. It's if you've got all your bad songs out of the way and then you're on a roll, then you want the public to see that. But if you're starting out, then obviously your tries and all your disappointments, they're very often seen in the public eye. Well, they were for me. So when we got to Drums and Wires, I made a conscious effort to be myself. So yeah, there we go. The hardest battle again.
I mean, how would you compare yourself as, I mean, because about a year, well, not a year ago, last summer, I interviewed Andy, and I've also interviewed you, Pageant, since then too. So I've kind of gotten a couple of perspectives from different angles on this. How would you compare yourself as a songwriter as opposed to Andy? I mean, Andy, he talked about and described, how songs come to him, how lyrics come to him, and that's not something that a lot of people do. They don't do it quite that way. How is it different for you and the process of arriving at a song?
Well, I can't speak for Andy, but I can only speak for myself and say that, until there's a marriage between words and music, then there is no song. You can have chords and stuff that you really like, and they're really emoting on your being, the shift in chords. And you think, well, I just got to put that to one side and squirrel it away and save it until a lyric can come up and a melody to go with it. And then there's the other side of it with the lyrics. You just, that would be a great subject matter, or that's a great first line. But until there's a marriage between the two, then, nothing is achieved really. So, the two different camps have to come together. That's the way it is for me. And then once I get the first line and that melody goes with the music that I've come up with, the chord sequence, and then I'm away. And then, the rest is just working it out.
Right.
Like a crossword puzzle, you just slot them in, and you think, no, that word doesn't sound right there. You're gonna have to think up something else, and then you just work through it until you come to a final, template.
In these periods of when you're not so focused on music, do you ever attempt to write during those periods, or does something just have to come to you before you grab the guitar and start ripping something out?
Yeah, I don't force it. Now I'm playing bass. I'm playing bass on this Hanna-Barbera cartoon thing, which is good because I'm going back to how things started for me, which was just being a bass player, and that's great. I'm not thinking about writing at the moment. I'm just playing bass sessions, and I enjoy that too. Yeah.
So the Hanna-Barbera thing, tell me about that a little bit.
They're doing. I think they're doing a film called Jellystone. I think, which I think, as far as if I got this right, it's Yogi Bear, the Flintstones, Top Cat, all rolled into one. And they said this chap, Ego Plum, I think his name was. Do you know this guy? Yeah. But anyway, he said to me, do you fancy playing bass on the theme tune? I said, well, that sounds a bit novel. So, yeah. So that's what I've been doing this week, Yeah.
That's great. So when you guys stopped touring in 1982, and this is, I know this is something that people kind of focus on, but they focus on, what happened to Andy, the panic attacks, the Valium, addiction. But, I've always been kind of fascinated by what the rest of you guys were thinking as that was going on. I mean, here's a guy who, like we said, it has, been a pretty dominant presence in this band, and all of a sudden he tells you, I can't do this anymore. As guys who are, really just starting to get the ball rolling with success, and then to all of a sudden not have it. Clearly, Terry, felt like he needed to leave the band. But for you and Dave, what was that like? I mean, that had to be incredibly frightening to go through, to see Andy, kind of fall apart like this.
Yeah, he can be quite fragile emotionally, I think. And I don't know. I just thought that that's what bands do. They tour and they promote the record. I just thought that's what they had to do in order to promote the record. I didn't. I feared for our survival. Yeah, because I didn't. I had this notion that in my head that bands really can't survive unless they tour as well to promote their records. So it was frightening, but at the same time, I got to see my kids grow up. What's not to like about that? And,
Right.
that's in a way it saved me as well. When we're coming off the road like that. And I had my family by then; they were pretty young, and so it was. I wanted to see them grow up, and probably I wouldn't have had we been carrying on touring, certainly to the extent that we did. But that's another story.
Did the strike against Virgin Records kind of do the same thing? I don't know if I want to say it bought you more time because clearly you're making a statement at the same time. But like you said, I mean, you were able to live your life. You're able to do the things that you wanted to do and spend time, raising your kids and with your family. I mean, did having already experienced that with coming off the road, did that make the strike with Virgin easier to handle?
Well, it means we didn't work for a long time. I think we all did sessions with other people just to work.
Right.
Um, it was difficult because we had such a rotten deal back from 1977. Of course, Virgin were happy to carry on with the deal as long as it took. It was like, well, we're just not making anything, out of this. What do you want us to do? So we pled poverty and said, we're really not going to make another record until, you up the ante a bit.
Right.
And the deal was so rotten from 1977 that we felt it was the only thing to do. But I think it came at a cost because we'd gone so long without making a record, and it made doing Apple Venus that much more precious in a way, and maybe that contributed to the breakup of the band.
It's interesting that Apple Venus and Wasp Star is now 21 years old. I mean, it's hard to imagine it's been that long. I mean, I remember buying it in the store and being, both albums in the store and being, like so excited that, after all this time, again, it was like feeling like a gift has been given to you. Did you ever feel like there was a sense of closure about XTC, or was that even something you even needed at the time?
No, after those records, I thought we were going to go on and make another. Andy played his cards pretty close to his chest. And when he suggested that he was going to put all his demos out, I thought, oh, Christ, shouldn't we be thinking about an album, And doing the Fuzzy Warbles thing. And he said, do you want to come in with me? I said, well, I'm not really interested in that, And that was the beginning of the kind of a breakup because I could tell he had a different agenda to me. And, the gap between us got wider, I think. We became quite estranged, I think, until the breakup. So the breakup came in probably the summer of 2006, and we had an argument about money, and that was it really. But we'd had a good run. I think you've got to look at it that way, really. We've had a good run, and things can go on forever.
But you're all still living in Swindon. I mean, Swindon is a good sized town, but it's not so big where you may accidentally run into somebody, a Dave Gregory, an Andy Partridge. I mean, do you see him at like the grocery store or at the bank, or you ever bump into the guy, or what happens?
Well, we don't. Our paths don't really cross because I'm living just outside of town, and I think Andy's he has another house in Brighton as well, which he divides his time between the two, I think. So I very rarely see him. I remember pulling up to a pedestrian crossing and him crossing the road in front of me. It was very like that scene in Psycho. So
as long as he didn't meet you in the shower, I think you'd probably be okay.
Oh, that would never happen. No.
With Terry obviously living in Australia for all those years, and then suddenly he just arrives. I mean, can you even think about or imagine a scenario where the two of you could come to an agreement, or bury the hatchet or something, or do you think that relationship has just played itself out and has gone past its expiration date?
I think you become different people as you get older. Your mindset changes. Andy's agenda is completely different to mine, I'm sure, as is Terry's and Dave's probably. So you can't really go back.
Yeah.
It's you're on an express train, and they're going off in different directions.
It's funny. I think fans, they always want more. There's always this thirst to see you guys get back together. But I think what a lot of fans don't realize is you and Andy were in a band since 1972. I mean, it's not like you're joined at the hip. You have different lives and different, like you say, different motivations and different desires. I think we can all relate to the idea of the people that we knew 30, 40 years ago are not the same people that you necessarily have anything in common with today. And it to me, it's more human nature than about any kind of acrimonious feelings towards somebody. You just move on in life. And I think a lot of people, music fans, have a hard time imagining that because there's this binding glue between music and the consumer of music that seems, well, that should be more than enough to put you together. But that's not really the way humans interact with each other.
Yeah, well, the thing is, there is this thing called the internet, and you can conduct yourself with other humans without the need to meet them in person. Doing these bass sessions just recently, you send, it's very impersonal. You get the tracks via the internet, and you send your contribution down the line to them, and you've never met these people, but you do converse with email, and that's the thing with Andy and myself. While we've been conducting this interview, there's a feeling like we've never seen each other or there's no contact at all. That's not right. We do converse quite a bit over the internet. I spoke to him last week about some tapes and all the rest of it. So,
Hmm.
there is cordiality has come back, So, that's all to the good. But at the time of the breakup, it was a bit rough. Yeah.
Now that the hardest battle is out and the video is out, I mean, are you more or less inclined to release more singles like this?
If they come up and if the songs come up, I wouldn't put anything out that I didn't really have faith in, or if I release singles, then they have to be good singles, and that's the criteria I work to. If nothing comes up, then you won't get anything. I suppose that's as simple as that. But if I do come up with a song that I think, my God, that is really good, I've got to get that out. Then you'll hear it.
So there's not a Colin Moudling's Fuzzy Warbles out there. There's not 8 CDs on the way.
No, I'm not interested in doing a warble. So my demos were principally for myself. They were more primitive. It was just something I needed to hear coming back at me to know whether things within the song work. So they were done for me. Whereas I think Andy's demos were more or less done for other people to demonstrate his prowess or whatever.
Right.
But no, my demos were strictly for me, really, and then should never have got out of the can. I'm disappointed when I see my demos spread all over the internet because they were never meant to be for other people's ears.
Yeah. But on the other hand, I mean, and I bought Andy's Fuzzy Warble. I mean, I bought everything that you guys have done. It both on CD and on vinyl, because that's the kind of a compulsive person I can be. But I hear what he had done and what he had released on those records, and it's impossible to imagine how XTC, in a different set of circumstances, couldn't have released 2 or 3 more albums. There was clearly enough material on his end, and I have to assume that if the band were still together, there would have been enough material on your end too. And I mean, I don't know how you were perceiving it at the time, that this could have just gone on and on. I mean, you talked about at least being one more record. I mean, could you have foreseen this continuing indefinitely, or were you kind of seeing, all right, maybe we're slowing down here?
Well, I was just looking for signs that things were ending, and I was coming up with stuff for the next album, which I thought would be, and but at the same time thinking this is going on a rather a long time, and you have to be realistic. So I'm happy to make another XTC record. Not now, but I was then. And with a view to doing another, and that was my mindset at the time. It's not my mindset now. I feel that has been done and put to bed now.
But the reaction of the new single, and again, the reaction to that, I have to assume is pretty validating to you. How do you feel about the reaction so far?
Well, the reaction's been very good, but people saying, well, it's his first single under his own name, and that doesn't mean very much to me. They're my babies, and whether I put them out on my own name or whether it's an XTC or with TC and I, it matters very little. I don't make so much of an issue that it's out under my own name. The fact remains we had a lockdown and I had to do the lot, really.
Right.
So it has to be under my own name, But there's no big, no banner waving about that,
For being such a fan for such a long time, and I'm sure you hear this, and I don't know how you respond to this, because if I put myself in your shoes, I would feel like, all right, I don't know what to do with that information. But it's like, my connection to your music is almost visceral in a way. It's my favorite band. When people ask me why, I can't tell you why, other than to say it just is. And it's been such a thrill to follow your career that, I've kind of passed that love of your music down to my own children. And, they love your songs and those albums. And, I can't tell you how many times they've asked me, hey, Dad, can I borrow Apple Venus? Can I borrow Skylarking?
Right.
And
that'll come back scratch then.
Well, maybe, but you know what? I'll always buy another one if that's the case. I know I'm not the first person to have told you stuff like that. When you hear a fan kind of, laud over what you have done, what is your reaction when you hear, a fan say, we love you, we want more?
Well, I'm grateful he's bought the record and he appreciates it, but I don't know what. I don't really want to know what he's doing for Christmas, or the names of his children or anything, but I'm just grateful that people enjoy it, and enjoying it as much as I enjoy making it.
The new stuff is terrific, and I hope that there is more along the way, because I'm always so appreciative when you or Andy release something new. I mean, even though I've probably have spent enough to put one of your kids through college or to buy a car or, a new sofa, whatever it may be, I'm always happy to contribute.
Well, thank you very much.
It's the very least I can do. The very least I can do.
Well, it's just music as far as I'm concerned. And as I said, playing bass on this cartoon theme tune this week, that's been great doing that as much as making the single. It's just music for me.
So when is that expected to be available?
Well, I think there is some sort of trailer without music actually on the web now, but I don't know what their time schedule is. They just want it now, and they want it straight away, and they want it snappy, and let's have it. So it nose to the grindstone for me this week.
Well, Colin, it's a real pleasure to talk to you, and I do appreciate you making the time to be on the podcast today. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Mike. I hope you can make head or tail of it. So.
Oh, I'll figure it out. Don't you worry.
Yeah, get the bread knife out on that tape. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Colin. I appreciate the time today.
Okay, thanks very much, and I'll say goodbye then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So there you go. The new single from Colin Moudling is called The Hardest Battle, and you can order it online on burningshed.com. If you like the interview, feel free to share it with every single person you know. I'd really appreciate it. I'd also appreciate hearing what you thought. You can email me at bax@rock102.com. You can also check out my regular updates on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Baxy's Fun Bag to see what's coming up next time. Thanks for listening to Baxy's Musical Podcast.